terms of mediations and so forth, there's no sort of compulsory mediation for financial matters. It's encouraged. But over here, the only point where there's a sort of a compulsory dispute resolution process is where you have children under 18, and they're encouraged to, actually attempt that process before you bring
Yes.
a application into court. But of course, once proceedings have commenced, or even if before they have, you are encouraged to explore other options. And of course, it's a lot, time effective and less costly to do that. So as a lawyer, that's what I would recommend to a client. But there's no, I suppose, legal obligation to do that.
Mm. And
Mm.
so another thing in Singapore, husbands cannot claim maintenance from their wives unless they're incapacitated. Is that the same in Perth?
Over here, I find that, so there are two concepts here in WA. Children's maintenance is a separate component to spousal maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that while spousal maintenance does exist, it is not as commonly claimed as I remember it being claimed in Singapore. So it can be for either spouse. It's not gender specific.
Yeah.
But with children's maintenance, actually, it's now all taken care of through the child support agency. So I think my understanding of the background was that obviously with children's maintenance cases, there were so many and it would clog up the system. So a separate agency was created to completely handle children's maintenance or
Oh,
child support
wow.
issues.
Yeah.
So the child support agency over here has a formula that with some magical numbers that you plug into the system, and they will actually calculate based on a child of a particular age what sort of numbers we're looking at for their maintenance, obviously taking into account both parties' income and expenses, as well as how often a child is with a particular parent. So if, for example, the child lives predominantly with the father and then spends time with the mother on the weekends, it might very well be the case that the mother is paying child support to the father for the child who's in the father's care. So
Yeah.
child support is a different animal. I don't touch it very often. Yeah.
That's amazing that there's an agency that's been set up to deal with all the cases. So lawyers
Yeah.
don't get involved in at all.
There is, well, no,
A little
that's
bit.
probably not quite accurate. There's obviously options to deviate from the agency. So the
Yeah.
agency's figures are usually a baseline and they can be fairly low. So obviously with lifestyles that are a bit more comfortable, I don't know how to put
Yes.
this, but yeah, it is possible for parties to actually mutually agree to a different figure that is than what child support agency says. So you can
Yeah.
either have it in complete replacement of what child support would have mandated you to pay, or you can have it as a top up to what the child support agency figure is, and then you can top up for things like private medical insurance, private school costs, and so on and so forth.
It's amazing. And I've also heard another amazing thing in Australia is that if you're trying to get like tax documents, you can get it directly from the Australian tax office. Is that true?
I think there is, again, avenues for subpoenas and things like that. So
Okay.
you can actually obtain documents directly. Like we can get them directly from the bank. If you're looking for bank statements, I would have just issued a subpoena to the bank and asked them to produce certain documents. The ATO does keep records of other things. So superannuation was another thing, a beast that I didn't knew
Yes.
existed until I got here. In Singapore, I think we were all used to the concept of CPF, and
CPF.
it sort of just disappears and you don't think about it until maybe you're
Yes.
buying a house or when you're retiring. But over here, people actually are a bit more active in managing their superannuation. So you can
Yeah.
choose the fund. Unlike Singapore, it's just CPF and you don't have a choice. Over here, you have a choice. And then obviously what happens to your superannuation comes into play with family law issues, succession planning, etc., etc. So the ATO does keep some information about what your balance of your superannuation is. You've got to, submit updates and
Documents.
records.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot more information that you can get.
Wow. Fascinating. And do you
Yeah.
have any interesting cases that you can share with listeners about that have either inspired you or just really, something that's been interesting that's impacted you?
We didn't plan this one, Sarah.
Oh,
No,
that's
I'm
okay.
teasing.
That's fine.
No, I'm
We
kidding.
can.
No, not really off the top of my head right now. I am an independent children's lawyer, and I think one of the things I suppose I'd talk about is a bit more of a personal story because my parents are divorced, and I think a lot of that has influenced why I came into family law. It wasn't the most pleasant experience, and so now what I bring to a lot of my cases is also this fact that I was the child in that situation. And so when I
Mm,
talk to my clients, I say to them, this is your child, and don't put your child through these things. They don't want to hear
mm.
that you don't like mummy. They don't want to
Yeah.
hear that daddy has done ABC. Because when I
Yes.
was a child and I heard those things, I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to get involved. So I
Yes.
bring a lot of that to my cases as well.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to say to my clients is, your child is now 2 years old. You can't stand each other, but you have no choice but to get on with this person
Mm,
because you've got this child now for life. And
yes.
my hope for you is that one day this child gets married and you can both attend the wedding. One day this
Mm,
child is going to graduate from school and you're both going to attend. So the sooner you can get to a place where you're civil with each other and respectful of their role as the other parent, the better
mm.
it is for everybody, and especially
Yes.
your child, because
Yes.
yeah, it's no fun being in the middle. And
No.
so that's I think that rather than saying one case that has inspired me, I think it was my own personal experience that I
Yeah.
really try to take to every case and say, there is a better way. We don't
Mm.
have to do this. We don't have to be ugly. Let's go forward.
Yes. I often think that when we come with that personal experience, that can hold a lot of weight. Whether it's law or just life in general, when you tell people, hey,
Mm,
I have been through this, I know what it's like, um, you know, and I think that's when clients or people, your friends, can really be impacted by that because you have walked that journey.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
so
I think
good.
that very much. And also, I think in that same token, becoming a parent, before I couldn't say certain things, but now because I'm also a parent, when a
Yes.
client tells me something, I go, no, well, I'm a parent too. And that doesn't sound reasonable to me. Or sometimes they
Yes.
try to tell me things like, oh, but my 8-year-old said blah, blah, blah. And I said,
Yeah.
kind of, hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Let's be realistic here. I
Yeah.
have an 8-year-old, and
Yeah.
that's not what they would, So it
Yes.
definitely does bring something else to the table when you have experienced it for yourself.
Wonderful. So good. And what has been the biggest take home from family law for you? Like what are you most inspired about? Just impacting lives? Has that been your
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think my most rewarding thing is when I've seen a few cases in my life, and this was actually while I was in Singapore, where the client came to me when he first found out that the marriage had broken down, and he had no idea why. And then as the weeks progressed, we together, because he called me every day,
Oh
together we
wow.
discovered,
Okay.
yeah, this was a very involved matter. But it's remained with me for many years, and it's one of my favorite things to look back on and remind myself why I do this. But yeah, so this client came to us when it was still early days. He'd been served with the divorce papers. He had no idea what happened. And then as the weeks progressed, he decided to do a bit more investigation. He was very upset, actually. It was very
Mm.
mentally difficult for him. And then to discover that actually the reason for the breakdown was not the allegations the wife was making about him, but because she was having an affair. And
Oh.
so she actually wanted out. But of course, it was in this convoluted way that it happened. And
Mm.
so then I was helping him through the fallout of that, where he realized this is the
Mm.
situation. And I had to talk him through, look, these are your options. You could go down this road and do certain things. But the bigger thing for him wasn't so much the financial aspect, was because of the children. Because I suppose in alleging all these things about her former husband, the wife then said, and therefore he's not a fit parent, and the children shouldn't be
Mm.
with him, etc. And so he hadn't seen the children for a really long time. And so obviously, in part and parcel of this case, as we went along, and this was again over the span of many months and I think into years. But at the end of that whole case, the children actually ended up living with dad. And what I said to
Mm.
my client at the start was, the truth comes out eventually. The family
Yes.
law system, people have a lot of negative things to say. It's very long, it takes a long time. The other party's saying all these lies. How do they get away with it? And I say to my clients, it will come out eventually. If you're doing the right things and you are, what you say you are, and you are doing what you say you are doing, it will come across. And the
Mm.
court isn't that stupid. And we've seen so many of these cases that people who aren't telling the right thing or doing the right thing will not sustain it. And you will get better. So you've got to just, it's a long game, and you've got to just stick it out, do the right things, follow the advice that I'm trying to give you to get you out of this situation, and it will be okay in the end. So this case
Wow.
always has stuck with me because that client
Yeah.
was so grateful, and I was just really, really satisfied, I think, personally, on a professional and personal level, that I was able to help somebody through such a difficult time in their life.
Yeah.
And then to now still be at the end of at the end of this process, to see what happened at the end. And I could see that transformation of the person
Yes.
from, how it was difficult to how he has now overcome, and it's in a much better place now. So that was very rewarding.
Amazing. So good. All
Yeah.
right, Faiza, we're going to end off the episode, but before we
Yeah.
do, what's next for you?
Well, what's next is actually, I've been here now in Perth for a little while, so I'm absolutely keen on building my practice and, working forward from here. So, if there's anybody who I can help, and if you know of somebody that I might, be the right fit for, please feel free to reach out to me, and, let's see how I can help them there.
And how can people reach out to you?
Yep. So I've got a Facebook page and an Instagram page right now. It's called Faiza the Family Lawyer. So it's just my name, the Family Lawyer, one word. And you'll be able to find my profile and drop me a message. You could also look me up on LinkedIn. And of course, if you're in WA and you are familiar with Dwyer Dirac, then you can find me through the firm's website. But yeah, please feel free to give me a
Wonderful.
ring.
Well, thank you so much, Faiza, for joining us on today's show. I'll put all the links in the episode notes. For listeners, have a wonderful day. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, hearing about Faiza's journey from Singapore to Perth and everything in between.